We are going to be taking that press conference live with the Reform Party in just a moment. They're going to be announcing a candidate to stand in the by-election in Wellingborough, Northamptonshire. Of course, Peter Bone was kicked out of that seat. And we're going to be waiting to see who it is. Who will the Reform put up as their first candidate? Will it be Nigel Farage?
There'll be a lot of speculation about that. He did so brilliantly in the jungle, didn't he, before Christmas, came third. Despite my votes, I thought he might win.
I thought he might win, but of course Nigel is a divisive figure. He remains a divisive figure, and that will no doubt be on the mind of Richard Tice and the other members of the Reform Party.
He's also, we shouldn't forget, he's lost.
Listen to Nigel.
He has stood 7 times and not won, and you may just think, have I done that?
Yeah. People don't listen to Nigel Farage, unfortunately. They just have a knee-jerk reflex reaction, don't they, to what the papers were writing about him for years. Let's see what you've been saying at home. We've been talking, of course, about the...
He started.
Here's Richard.
Here he goes.
To everybody. And, of course, at a time of New Year, we want to be optimistic. And it's delighted that so many of you have resisted the temptation to join Sir Ed Davey and the Lib Dems on unveiling a poster down in sunny Guildford, because you want to hear what we're up to. We are optimistic politically because, as Alex quite rightly said, this is an election year. Now, let's be clear. The country never voted that it was ready for Rishi. But I am absolutely certain that the country is ready for Rishi to call an election sooner rather than later. Because I'm also certain, and in fact I'm cheerful, I'm optimistic, that the country quite rightly wants to punish the Tories for breaking Britain, because that is what they want to do. I think the country wants to punish them, to oust them and replace them. The question is what we replace them with. Now, 3 years ago, when I launched Reform UK, the Tories laughed at me. They said, "Why are you bothering? We're getting it sorted." And to coin an expression from my good friend Nigel in the European Parliament, they're not laughing now. No, the truth is the Tories are terrified. Yes, in the new year, the special pleading has already started. Oh, please don't stand here. Please don't stand there. I'm one of the nice guys. I believe in everything that you believe in. You've all broken Britain. You're all responsible. So there's no special deals. We stand in every single seat in England, Scotland and Wales. Now, of course, the Prime Minister, he likes his maths. He's a technocrat. He likes to mark things. So I thought we ought, first of all, to start by marking his exam report for last year, because he stood up almost exactly a year ago and gave us his 5 pledges, didn't he? You remember those 5? Well, let's just see how he's got on. Stopping the boats. 30,000 illegal migrants later, I think we can mark that down as a fail. Growing the economy. Well, the latest economic data shows that actually the economy is not growing. It's going into reverse. It's getting smaller. So we're going to mark that down as a fail as well. Reducing debts, well, he's failed at that as well. So he wants us all to be good at maths. Well, let's just look at the maths. So far, 3 fails out of 3. He wants to cut the waiting lists. Well, it's not gone so well either, has it, Prime Minister? The waiting lists have gone up. So we're going to mark that as a fail as well. But credit where credit's due. He said he would halve inflation, and inflation has halved. So we'll put that down as a pass. So that's 1 pass out of 5, which we all know is 20%. So in any exam that I suspect any of us have taken part in, 20% is a fail. No ifs, no buts. You might want to resit, but in many schools and colleges, if you're that bad, you wouldn't even be allowed to resit the exam. And that's the point. I think the country, the voters will say, Prime Minister, you're not allowed to continue to run the country. You have failed. And the reason that they've failed, we've got a slide here, is because of what they've done to the country. The truth is, the Tories have become like the Labour Party. Two sides of the same socialist coin. We've got record high taxes, we've got record high wasteful government spending, and yet disastrous outcomes, whether it's in health, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in housing, trying to see a GP, everything is getting worse. We've got record nanny state regulations. They've utterly failed to take advantage of the great Brexit opportunity that offers so much promise, and still does, with the right leadership. And of course, the biggest betrayal of all by this government is on immigration. They absolutely promised, election after election, particularly when we were going to get Brexit done, that they would bring down lawful immigration. And yet they've deliberately done exactly the opposite. They've betrayed the people. In particular, they've betrayed Brexit voters and the working class voters. They've opened the borders to mass, uncontrolled immigration of a scale that this country has never seen before. And both economically and culturally, that is not good for the United Kingdom. The other similarity between the two main parties, of course, is they're obsessed with the multi-trillion-pound cost of net zero. The problem is, and Rishi has failed in one of his pledges, you cannot grow an economy with the burden of these 5 key factors. And that's why the economy is doing the opposite of what everybody thought. The economy is not growing. It's flatlining. There's no growth. And if there's no growth, you eventually run out of money if you keep increasing spending. So what's the alternative? Well, the country needs a serious wake-up call, because the alternative actually is Starmergeddon. Starmergeddon is a risk near you in 2024. We are facing a catastrophic cocktail of economic incompetence and cultural pillage that would be a disaster for the United Kingdom. Because, of course, in every Labour government, every socialist way, they want more taxes. They want to take more of your money. Unbelievably, they want to get closer to the failing, sclerotic, recessionary European Union. We've just left it, and thank God we have. Germany's in recession. The EU's going nowhere. And yet Starmergeddon wants to take us closer to it. They want more government spending, of course. That's what socialists do. They want more nanny state regulations because they think they know how to control your life better than you do. And, of course, they want to betray the working class. I mean, the Labour Party was founded supposedly to protect and promote the working class. But with more mass immigration, you get exactly the opposite. An absolute disaster that has the effect of depressing British wages. And I'll give you an example of that. In the fast food delivery business, all the big fast food companies, they are complicit in allowing massive illegal working, huge illegal working, which is depressing wages of decent British working class people. And that is wrong, but that is the betrayal of the Labour Party. And of course, they're even more obsessed with net zero than the Tories. You cannot grow an economy under this burden. It's never been done before. Now, Jeremy Hunt, the other month, he was sort of celebrating when you had growth of 0.1 or 0.2%. For heaven's sake, man, that's feeble, that's pathetic. I remind people, in the 80s and 90s, the country was growing at 2.5 to 3% plus every single year. We're lucky if we grow at all. And here's the point that nobody's talking about enough. The deficit this year, already at almost 120 billion, is likely to end up by April at 150 billion pounds a year. If you have no growth and you keep spending more than you earn, then next year it'll be between 150 and 200 billion pounds. And eventually the bond markets say we're done. Enough is enough. no more. You've run out of cash. You've run out of money. You're bankrupt. That is where Starmergeddon is taking us, with these key elements. And it is a catastrophe, an absolute cocktail of catastrophic incompetence. So we're crystal clear. Only Reform UK, with our policies, can now save Britain. The key thing is, we've got a cost of living crisis. The fastest and best way, the most helpful way to deal with that is, as I've said before, exactly a year ago, I said you've got to make work pay. You've got to lift the starting point at which anybody pays any income tax from 12.5 grand to £20,000. That frees up 6 million people from any income tax at all. Net, it's about 30 quid a week. That is a significant difference to millions of households. Of course, there's lots of other taxes we need to cut as well in business, and also things like fuel duty. We should be cutting 20p of every litre of fuel. That will make a huge difference to individuals and to small businesses. And it's brilliant that our fantastic London mayoral candidate, Howard Cox, who's here today, he, of course, has been the champion of freezing fuel duty for many years. We've got to cut the wasteful government spending. It's off the scale. All of us in our households, small businesses, we're looking at our budgets and we're saying, we've got to save 5 quid in 100 without affecting our products, our frontline services, while still paying the bills. If you do that in government, every single manager of every quango, commission, department, council, it soon adds up. Yes, it's well north of £50 billion a year. That's what's got to be done. And of course, you've got to take advantage of the great, brilliant opportunities from Brexit. You've got to cut thousands and thousands of daft EU regulations. The Tories, once again, they promised it. They even got a little bill together to get rid of 4,000 regs. And then the Prime Minister cowardly, feebly bottled it as he cozied up to Ursula von der Leyen. Hopeless. If you're going to do something like Brexit, for God's sake, do it properly. On immigration, we've got to freeze non-essential immigration. One in, one out. That is what the British people vote, I believe. That's what the people want. The British people never voted for mass immigration. And finally, we've got to scrap the totally job-destroying £1 trillion cost of net zero. Just that alone will make people better off. That alone will ease the cost of living crisis. I talk about the betrayal of Labour against the working class. Net zero, every week, every month, is destroying thousands of skilled manufacturing jobs, steel jobs, automotive jobs. They've betrayed their own people. Only Reform UK now is the party of the working class, who will stop mass immigration, who will scrap net zero, who will help solve the cost of living crisis. And if we do these things together as a nation, as Alex quite rightly said earlier, if you want change, you've got to vote for it. And if the country votes for this change, then the result will be a high-growth, dynamic economy where all of us feel a great deal better off. Now, we're making great progress. We're going to be ready whenever the election is called. We've got our sort of spring rally. We're bringing it forward a bit, spring, on the 24th of February in Doncaster, so that we're ready, announcing all our hundreds and hundreds of candidates. We're almost there. We're approaching 500 approved and allocated, hundreds more applying as every day goes by. So we will be ready. But the first election is actually just a few weeks away. Yes, there's going to be a by-election in Wellingborough in Northamptonshire, and I'm delighted to say that we have selected our candidate, fantastic, brilliant candidate, who's here today. I'm going to invite him to the stage. He is none other than my joint deputy leader, Ben Habib.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming this morning. I can't really follow Alex's and Richard's exposition of the disaster that has become the governance of this country in any greater detail than they have. But to say just one thing, if I may, what's really been exercising me since 2020, which kept me in the political arena after we ostensibly left the European Union, was an act of complete and utter political weakness by our government. The partitioning of the United Kingdom between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And if you want any one symptom of the utter collapse of British spirit, what we stand for, the cultural, territorial, constitutional, political, economic integrity of our country, it is the Northern Ireland Protocol, and the Windsor Framework, frankly, in my opinion, is even worse than the original document. And we've been lied to repeatedly over that document. We've been told that actually it's the best of both worlds. It isn't. It's the worst of all worlds for Northern Ireland. In 1982, we launched our armed forces to go and protect 1,800 British people 10,000 miles away. Wind the clock on, and we've given up 1.8 million people in Northern Ireland without a single shot being fired, without an insurgency, and without so much as a democratic vote in favour of it. And anyone in this room who thinks that I'm making too much of Northern Ireland totally underestimates what it represents in terms of the collapse of this country. So I was kept in the political arena, essentially, initially for Northern Ireland. But as the years have wound on, and Richard, as I mentioned, explained so clearly, as the years have wound on, this government has brought the United Kingdom to the precipice of economic collapse, cultural collapse, labour market collapse, industrial collapse. You name it, we are facing that problem. And as Margaret Thatcher, I think she was arguably the only decent Conservative Prime Minister we've had since Winston Churchill. As Margaret Thatcher said, and it should be known very well to Rishi Sunak, the problem with that you eventually run out of other people's money. And that's where we are at. I reluctantly joined Reform UK. I'm sure Richard won't mind me saying that. I reluctantly joined because I'd left the party political system and I was campaigning for Northern Ireland, fighting for a proper Brexit, doing stuff outside a party tent. But I was drawn in eventually to Reform because the only way to make an impact, ultimately, in a democracy is at the polls, in an election. The electoral impact is the only thing that matters in Westminster. And my initial aim, as some of you may recall when I announced my joining Reform UK in March last year, was to obliterate the Tory party. They've beaten me to it. And I take the position extremely responsibly. And the reason I'm standing in Wellingborough is because it's not sufficient anymore simply to defeat the Tories. We have to lead the way. Reform UK has to lead the way and get seats in Parliament. We don't need to get many seats, but if we can get a dozen or more seats in Parliament at the next general election. And a lot of you will be rolling your eyes thinking, oh yeah, fancy chance that. But let me tell you, the political environment is extremely febrile. People are extremely upset. No one thought we'd vote for Brexit, but we did. In fact, there were 4 plebiscites in favour of Brexit. And I think the political sands are shifting in a way that they haven't shifted for years. And it is incumbent, therefore, on Reform UK not to be just a destructive force, but to be a constructive one. And I intend to give Wellingborough by-election the best swing of my bat. And if I am elected, I will stand in the Commons and hold this wretched government to account to the very best of my ability for the people of Wellingborough and the great British people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Bullish talk as ever. Now, before I talk about take some questions from the media, obviously many of you want to know what in this election year are Nigel's plans. He's back from the jungle. He's recovered. Hopefully the stomach is in better shape from the travails of the Bush-Tucker trials. And we've been talking over the Christmas period. And he's obviously giving a lot of thought as to the extent of the role that he wants to play in helping Reform UK, frankly, save Britain. And he is still assessing that. And as and when we have all collectively come to a decision, obviously, we look forward to letting everybody know. I'm not a poker player, but I know that a good poker player doesn't show their hand too early. Nigel is the master of political timing, but I'm very clear. The job at hand is so big to save Britain. The more help that Nigel is able to give in the election campaign, frankly, the better. Because the crisis facing the country, the crisis, the catastrophe that would befall us with Starmergeddon is really, really serious.